Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college ball and all things Giants football. I'm Sal, here with my co-host Monty. What's going on, man?
What's going on, man? So everything's over, at least as far as the Giants and college football. We're in draft season, baby.
Yeah, and before we start, I want to give a shout out to my guy Hefe, Spiro, Mr. Glass Half Full, and Eli Rax. Thank you for sending the hat, and thank you to LPG. This is one of yours. It's a cool hat, so I appreciate that. Wanted to sport it for the show. Um, But yeah, so here we go, man. The football season's over. This is episode 2 of our 4-part series in Senior Bowl prospect previews. We got 10 prospects today to go over. 10 on the offensive side. We did 10 on defensive side last week. So if you didn't catch that, go tune in for that. And we're going to be doing 20 more, 10 each after this, offense and defense. Before we get into the Senior Bowl prospects, a little bit of homework to clean up here. Two things. First and foremost, we love college football. That's what we're about. So congrats to the Michigan Wolverines, your national college football champions. Not a surprise to the two of us. I tweeted that after the game. It feels like every single week that we did these prospect reviews, man. Like we were like, oh, number 2 or number 3 on our list is a Michigan Wolverine, and we said the same thing every single week. Man, this guy looks really well coached. This guy looks really well coached. It was like a consistent theme in every position group. And we started adding it up, and we're like, well, shit, these guys have a lot of players who are like at the top of their position group. So it wasn't a surprise to me that these guys were balling out in the title game. But what were your thoughts on that title game, man?
Yeah, man. I mean, to your point, we had 7 Michigan players win our top 5 positional previews for all our top 5 positions. So that's a lot. Um, it was an all right game. I'm happy for Michigan. I was rooting for Michigan. But you know, it wasn't an overly competitive game. Washington started to they made it a one touchdown game at one point. I was mostly more than anything rooting for a good quarterback game. They kind of took the ball out of JJ McCarthy's hands, and Michael Penix got hurt, and that defense was throwing him for a loop. So as
Yeah.
far from that standpoint, it wasn't the best. Definitely enjoyed the round earlier a lot more.
Yeah, I'll say this. Number one, congrats to Michael Penix Jr. and that entire Washington squad because they really were. To me, this was the matchup I wanted all year. Like to me, they were the team that I wanted to see get to the Natty outside of like Michigan or whoever came out of the Big Ten, and through that gauntlet. They were awesome for 2 straight years. They were awesome this year. They won so many big games. They're big time players. And they just ran into a damn good football team. That's it. And I said this to our friends on Twitter, like going into that game. I was like, I love Michael Penix Jr. You guys all don't know that by now, and I love this Washington offense. But I was like, man, this Michigan defense, this is an NFL defense. This is a tough matchup for anybody, and I just think it was this is one of those games where I just figured it kind of went ultimately the way I thought it would, which is Michigan was going to pound the rock. They ran for 300 yards. It's a very Michigan-like game, and they were going to just play great defense and just kind of wear down the other team. That's what happened. But like when you get to the national title game, you got two teams who are going to lean on what got them there. And at the end of the day, Michigan was just a little bit better. So congrats to them. Um, Speaking of which, we saw a defense from Michigan that it was incredible, right? A defense that is built off great athletes and versatile looks from one play to the next. A
Yep.
defense, run by Jesse Minter, who is a protege of Mike McDonald, who was a protege of Wade Martindale, and that entire Rex Ryan tree slash, but that came out of Baltimore. It's to me, it seems like that's the kind of defense you need in today's NFL. A versatile defense with different looks to defeat big time athletes. And we got some news in Giants land. We had one of those coordinators, Wink Martindale, and the Giants, as we predicted, quote, mutually parted ways. All the drama that everybody knows of by now happened. But what are your thoughts of Wink not being here anymore?
It's a fucking shame, man. It's a shame. We had a very good defensive coordinator. I know people want to try to say that Wink Martindale wasn't a very good defensive coordinator now that he's not on the Giants anymore, but he was. He was a very good defensive coordinator. We had 6 games under 20 points this year, which is the same amount as the Cleveland Browns, who the best team in the best defense in the league. We had some really low points this year, but we don't have a very talented um, team, but a talented roster. But at the end of the day, it it is what it is in some senses. It's these we knew that these guys had issues, and, they released that article in the New York Post, and it seems it was even more toxic than we kinda really even knew, and these guys did not get along. Um, I think it goes on to both of them. I think, you kinda heard from both sides there. It seems like both of them are kinda difficult people to work with. I think, I'm personally kinda just ready to put it in the past. I'm hoping that, some of the other coaches who weren't like Drew Wilkins, who are Wink Martindale's right-hand man, that some of the other coaches not liking, uh, Brian Dable was a little bit more smoke coming from Wink's camp, but we'll see. That, time will only tell on that stuff, but, I'm mostly just ready to put it behind us and, kind of go on and get a new defensive coordinator, unfortunately. How about yourself?
Yeah, it sucks. I think we saw it coming, so I was kind of prepared for it. I'll say this: whatever happened, happened. You can't go back and change things. And at the end of the day, Brian Dable's the head coach. He needs people he can work with. So I'll leave it at that. But I will say what Wink was doing and what he's been showing, what Mike McDonald's been showing in Baltimore, the best defense in the NFL, and what Jesse Minter is showing at Michigan is in the modern offensive era of football where you have explosive athletes on offense with a lot of rules in their favor. The only, you really have to be able to account for that and take whatever advantage you can. And defenses that show different looks and slow down the offense and kind of confuse quarterbacks, they're the ones that are probably gonna have some sustained success over the next few years, like that sit back, bend but don't break stuff is getting demolished, overly aggressive stuff is getting beat by quick processing quarterbacks, but there's like a balance there, right? Where if you have the right personnel and the right athletes, you can run that versatile defense. So I'm hoping the Giants, even though they lost Wink, I'm hoping they find a coordinator that will be able to do things like that, make use of different defensive back looks and things like that, because that's the key in the NFL today. And I mean, you and I both, I think, are on the same page here. We want to see them give a shot to Jerome Henderson. I think he's earned it. I think it's a guy who's, as our DB coach has shown, that he can be outstanding in coaching up all sorts of different defensive back looks, secondary looks, cover two, cover one, cover zero, cover three, quarters. He's got his guys trained up to do everything. So I hope they think about giving him a shot. Do you have any thoughts on that or any other candidates you're kind of interested in here?
Yeah, man. I mean, there's other candidates for sure, but I've been going back and forth with what exactly I want. I've always been, strong with give Jerome Henderson a shot, give Andre Patterson a shot, and I still stand by both of those. But I think Jerome Henderson is the one I would want to give the shot to because, he's been around the league for so long. He's been around since coaching since 2007. He was a passing game coordinator for Dan Quinn, in Atlanta, and, Dan Quinn's one of the best defensive minds in football. He's worked for Patrick Graham, who is a Bill Belichick disciple. He's worked for Wink Martindale, who's, that Buddy Ryan type defense disciple, and he's been around a lot of great defenses. He's been and he's kinda got to see them all, and I really think with how good of a coach he is, I think he would do a good job, and from my understanding, at least when, Brian Dable came in here, him and, Jerome Henderson had a very good relationship, and Jerome Henderson came in, kinda helped him, like, pick out do some of these interviews and things like that, so I think, it would be a good step, and I think, when you let go of a guy like Wink Martindale and all the other coaches in the room are kinda just like, it blew up like this, and they're kinda looking at you, I think, turn around and saying, like, "It didn't work with him, but I believe in you guys. I want you guys to step up and be the guys in the room." I think that will kinda help with the players, with the coaches, and the transition, and just like, "I like what we're building. Like, we don't fucking need that guy. It's okay. We're gonna handle this. No worries." And I kinda like taking that approach with this because I think the last thing I'll say is if we were going to go hire a guy who's never been a defensive coordinator before, and there's some names being thrown around like that, I don't think that there's anybody more qualified than Jerome Henderson right now who hasn't been a defensive coordinator. He's as qualified, if not more than any of them.
I'm 100% with you, man. Last bit of Giants news. This is the stuff that we've been banging the drum for a long time, and I think it was sort of expected at this point. Bobby Johnson was fired as O-line coach. Obviously, McGahee also lost his job. I'm not going to go into special team stuff, but O-line coach, obviously the most important position group the Giants have to replace. I was a little taken back. We got the news earlier today that they went and had and actually hired Carmen. How do you pronounce his last name?
I think it's Priscilla.
Carmen Bracillo, the O-line coach from the Raiders. They got permission to interview him earlier in the week. They hired him today. They asked to interview the O-line coach from Atlanta and were denied permission. So as far as we know, we don't know of any other candidates that the Giants did interview. There may have been others we just didn't hear about.
Mhm.
But personally, I kind of I think this guy's probably a good coach. His O lines have ranked well, and from what you hear, he's a good coach. He does more with less, which is the opposite of what we've been dealing with here. So that's encouraging. And I think Dante Scarnecchia, the legendary O line coach at New England for a long time, was his mentor essentially, and had nothing but glowing things to say about him. So that's always positive. Um, I will say, I know you have there's a spin you want to put on it that's positive, which I really like. I'll say this. One critique of this, it's not so much the person, but the process. To me, interviewing coaches when you have an opportunity like this for an open competition is an opportunity to take your time, not too much time, but some time, interview different people, and you get to learn from the people you interview. And I think that's an opportunity that may have been lost somewhat here. That if you interview different types of O-line coaches, whether it was Mike Munchak, if he wanted to be interviewed, or if the Eagles lose in a few days and Jeff Stoutland became available, or you name it, there were other candidates that you could have talked to. I think the Giants could have had an opportunity to kind of like say, here's 5 players in 3 games that we want you guys to all review really quickly and give us your input on these players. And I think you want to get answers from them. Like, what would you do differently? How would you coach them up? What technique would you use? Is Evan Neal a guard or is he a tackle? What do you see here? Like, I think there's information that could have been gathered in a more, um, maybe a more deliberate interview process and screening process. And I feel like that might have been lost in their haste to sign someone. I know people have told me that, hey, maybe they did interview people, you didn't hear about it. It's possible, but it's been 3 days. I mean, how much information could they have possibly gathered in 3 days? I don't get the impression they got a ton. So that's my only real criticism, but I'll let you give me your 2 cents on this one.
Yeah, man. I mean, my initial reaction was similar to yours. I don't like the process of how quickly they hired an offensive line coach. I felt like, I mean, that's the only one we heard about. And I'm sure they did talk to other ones, but how many? Like you said, it was only 3 days. I really like the idea of Dwayne Ledford, and like the Atlanta Falcons offensive line coach said, got rejected. But at the same time, there's rumors they're going to hire Bill Belichick. I don't know how long that process could take. Maybe it's going to take way too long where we never really had a shot to wait it out anyway. What if it materializes next week? Like, we don't know. And I would have rather to try to like just give it a little longer, see what happens after this first round of playoff game, see if anybody gets, fired after that. See if anybody gets hired and you can poach any coaches away, whatever. Regardless, I do like the hire. All that aside, I'm the more and more I look into more and more I look into Carmen Brasillo, the more and more I like him. He worked underneath Dante Scarnecchi. And it's funny, I hear a lot of people bringing up like, "Oh, I wish we got like an assistant from a top offensive line, like the Eagles, the Browns, whatever." I'm like, guys, you got an assistant from the best offensive line coach that's ever lived. Like,
Right.
like I didn't want an assistant. I wanted a proven coach, and this is honestly probably the bare level of the amount of proven I wanted, and that's just because I had high standards. That's not
Yeah.
me saying like he's a bare minimum. I had very high standards for what I wanted in an offensive line coach.
You wanted a difference maker. We talk about it all the time. Like
Yes.
there's very few real difference makers in O-line coaches, but if you can get one, they are cheat codes.
Correct. And I felt he was the bottom line of like what I wanted for a difference maker. He's no Mike Munchak, he's no Jeff Stoutland. I don't think he's Dwayne Ledford, but I think he is like a very good coach. I mean, he's done a lot with very little. That's what you've seen from him consistently. Like you said, I mean, he's graded a top half of the league almost every single year as far as like his pass block grades, his run block grades, scored PFF, his pass block efficiency, his run block efficiencies, and these are not with the most talented lines. He took, I know something we're really excited about, a guy that we've been pounding the table for the going free agency, Mike Owenwu from New England. He was his offensive line coach when Mike Owenwu came in the league as a 6th-round rookie. He went and won. He was the all rookie team as a 6th-round pick. He went on and was like, he don't think he was an all pro, but he was like an all pro caliber year. His 2nd year in the league, like had 2 of his best years under this guy as a 6th-round pick. And then he's kind of just worked and been everybody what I've seen from the Raiders are pissed they lost this guy. So that feels good. Unlike Bobby Johnson, where Bills fans are like, "Good, fucking take him."
Yeah, it's a very different feel. And the Onwenu part is the part that gives me hope because I think that's a guy you and I've talked about multiple times, like targeting. Like that's the kind of guy we need here, like a guy who'd be a solid tackle but could be an outstanding guard, and we kind of need that kind of person here, good athlete. So I'm hoping it means something. Let's see if it translates. But here's to a new beginning. At the end of the day, we wanted Bobby Johnson gone. Got a new coach in here. I'm not, beggars can't be choosers. I would have liked a little bit more in the process. Like, I'm not going to change my mind about that. But look, if the guy ends up being a really good coach who can actually like get this line fixed again and like get him functional to average to good and get something out of Evan Neal and Josh Azudu and these guys, it just helps us have a better feel for what we're doing with this offense going forward.
If he's good, no one's gonna care. Hey, if they interviewed nobody but Mike Munchak and hired him, I'd still be celebrating. This guy's just a
Right.
little bit more of an unknown, so
Exactly.
I gotta say.
All right. I think that sort of cleans up the business. I know there's a lot going on in Giants world. There's going to be a lot more to go, but we want to get to the meat of what we're doing here. I know it's a little it's sort of a lull in college football season with the season being over. But listen, the Senior Bowl is upon us. I know you guys might be tired of hearing of some of these lesser prospects, but the draft is made up in these middle rounds and these other seniors who you find day 2 and day 3 value on. So we're going to try to get you some guys here on offense that we're going to go through. Same format as last week. We're going to go through 10 players, position group by position group. These are not necessarily the big names at every position, but these are guys you need to know of because they're definitely good football players that any team should be considering. Um, for the sake of completion, we're going to have 2 quarterbacks here that I'm going to say right off the bat. If the Giants end up landing on any of these 2 quarterbacks, I'm absolutely going to consider going into like a monk like state and into and just meditate away the season. But why don't we get it started? Let me introduce the first guy here. So
Yeah, go for it.
our first Senior Bowl quarterback that we're reviewing is no other than QB1. For those who remember, Spencer Rattler from the University of South Carolina, 6'1", 217-pound, fifth-year player. He was a 5-star recruit, the #1 quarterback in the class of 2019. Highly ballyhooed prospect. There was that QB1 series that came out. Had enormous hope. Didn't pan out. Went to Oklahoma for a couple of years. Ultimately lost his job to Caleb Williams. Went transferred to South Carolina. The rest is kind of history. This past year, 3,186 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Monty, tell me what you think about Spencer Rattler, and we'll go through him over the next few minutes.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, Spencer Rattler is an interesting quarterback. I mean, like you said, he was the #1 guy coming out of Bishop Gorman and then teaming up with Lincoln Riley. He was supposed to be the next guy after Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray won the Heisman trophies, went first overall. He was just next up, and he just never really lived up to it in college. He was there 3 years at Oklahoma, and he ultimately lost his job to Caleb Williams in his Caleb Williams freshman year. And transferred to South Carolina and kind of had a resurgence, and he's certainly started to look like a better player, and more like an NFL player over the last couple years. At least the last like year and a half, he really started taking off towards the end of last year. I do think it was a good from everything I've seen for his maturity and things like that. He still has a lot of those traits that made him QB1. He has, a lot of velocity in his passes, and he has that the Mahomesian, like, ability at, like, to improvise. Like, when you see him, like, you hold the ball and kinda look around, try to buy time. It's the speed kinda reminds me of Mahomes. It's not, like, special, but he kinda takes off the pocket and, tries to pick up those 3rd downs when necessary. Um, but the issue is as much as he has the Mahomes like style and some good arm talent, he's just not even close to the player that Mahomes is. I'm not even saying that in like no duh, just like his skills are like not can't do what Mahomes can do. Like you see a guy like Cam Ward that we've talked about, and he flashes some of that shit. I just don't see those flashes from Spencer Rattler that I see from a guy like Cam Ward. He seems like he start to build a floor for himself, but I don't necessarily see the ceiling that we all kind of expected from Spencer Rattler. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I watched a couple of his game films, and I think my takeaway was you can see some of the traits that got everybody so enticed in his ability or his potential. But at the end of the day, what you really have on is a guy who, despite being in college for 5 years, still struggles with some simple aspects of the game, like quick processing, good decision making, avoiding pressure, and keeping plays and being able to produce positive plays out of pressure. Um, so he when you put him in a zone read or an RPO type system, he consistently makes the wrong read, which is kind of troubling for a fifth-year player. Like, he should be able to read, your defenders. Um, he does tend to hold the ball too long because I think he doesn't progress. He doesn't process post snap as well as you should for a guy with his experience. And he tends to be very late, especially on like timing routes, like because he's holding the ball too long. He's waiting for the break. He's waiting to see somebody open, and then he throws it in you see a breakup. So these are all the negatives. There are some things he does well. Like, I think he's still got good zip on his fastball. He's got good velocity. He's very accurate in the short game. And I think he operates a really good short game. Um, and I think if you ask him to do just that and just keep the chains moving with short game, there's an NFL player in there, you know? At the end of the day, I don't view him as a starter right away in the NFL. I don't know if I view him ever as a starter, like a full-time starter in the NFL. But I think you and I talked about this, where we think he could thrive or at least be useful is as a backup in a system that is built for a guy like Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, guys who are naturally athletic and gifted players. He obviously can't do the things they do in the passing game or with the high-end athleticism, but I think if you're saying to him, get out there and use your weapons by just operating quick game, like use your natural velocity to operate like short passing game and keep the ball moving and simplify it for him. I think he can be a useful player, but I don't see much else there.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think kind of like speaking to like where you can kind of just, move the ball almost you were talking almost describing a game manager right now. But I mean, you look at some of these stats and you can see where we're coming from that. He is 79.6 adjusted completion percentage.
Which is
Great. That's
great.
like almost 80%. That's awesome. 2.6% big time throw rate. Very, very, very bad. And if you guys remember, big time throw rate essentially is just NFL throws, making throws that like NFL quarterbacks can make and not other people in the world can make. And we know he has like the talent to do it, but it just hasn't been as part of his game. 2.2 turnover worthy player, very good. But again, that's like a 1-to-1. And a
It's
low,
literally a 1-to-1. He had 11 big time throws and 11 turnover worthy plays this year.
yep, there you
Yeah.
go. So
Yeah.
so that's where we're kind of coming from this. And I agree with you. I see guy who's really risen his floor and a guy who, like you mentioned, like as a backup for like a Patrick Mahomes, like a Lamar Jackson, I think he'd be a guy who would really benefit in a system like that, and I think teams would appreciate having a guy like that there that they could develop. And I could see if he could really come into the league, play behind one of those guys, and kind of prove that he's turned the leaf and he is a true professional now, and he can handle like just the preparation of being a backup and understanding his role. Maybe there's a place where he develops under a good coach like this where he could have a Tyrod Taylor like career path where when his rookie contract comes up, he gets his chance and he can take the best of it because we know he has a lot of talent. But I think that's his best path to being a starter one day in this league is being drafted as a backup and going to a good system and just accepting his role and becoming like a professional in this league. I think that is where he needs to go if he wants to see success.
100% agree. All right. Let's go to our next player then. You want to introduce our guy here? Our next player on the list?
Sure, no
Another
problem.
quarterback?
Yep. So our next Senior Bowl quarterback, Michael Pratt. He's out of Tulane, 6'3", 220 pounds. He's a fourth-year player. He was a three-star recruit. He had this year a 65.4 completion percentage, 2,406 passing yards, 22 TDs, and 5 interceptions. So why don't you tell him a little bit about Michael Pratt?
Michael Pratt is kind of a little bit of a throwback pro style quarterback. He's a big dude. You see him on film. He looks very different than Spencer Rattler. This guy's closer to 6'4". He looks like a tight end out there. Looks like Ben Roethlisberger out there, honestly. That is his stature wise. Drops back out of shotgun, short, pretty good footwork. Takes a few steps and he gets the ball out fairly quickly. He's got a live arm in the short and intermediate area. He's got an interesting arm. Like if he's just slinging it with his wrists, he can really spin it like in the short area and the intermediate area. Like he's got good zip. He has good. He can throw darts like in that short area, like all over the field. You see him throwing across the field in the short area, and he does a good job operating short and intermediate game. He also can do well if you ask him to cut the field in half. Like when you cut the field in half for him and do have like one side reads, he does a good job of like going high to low and layering in his throws and throwing with anticipation. He does a good job of leading his receivers. So there are aspects to his game that are things that I think can translate to some NFL success. He's mobile enough. He's pretty good on the run, but it's more like design runs, power runs, almost like Josh Allen or Daniel Jones. He gets the ball, he starts running, he starts lumbering over people. He's not somebody who scrambles and throws a lot, like on the move with different arm angles and off platform. He runs and scrambles, and if he throws it, he has to kind of stop and reset and throw. His arm strength does start to fail when he starts going into like deeper passes. You see the ball die. He doesn't have the natural arm strength and velocity to make a lot of good deep ball throws. So that zip he has in the short area dies in longer throws. And he's a good, not great athlete, and he makes some really stupid mistakes because he trusts his arm in the short area, maybe a little too much. But overall, he's a very reliable player. So in summary, and you tell me what this sounds like: big, 6'3", 6'4", kind of looks like a pro style quarterback with a little bit more juice to him in his movement. Good short area, zip and accuracy, can operate in half field game, doesn't do full field game as well. Deep ball doesn't have the velocity that you need to kind of consistently defeat defenses, and really good on design runs, not a scrambler to throw off platform. So yeah,
Sounds like every Senior Bowl MVP ever. But especially the one that's on the New York Giants, Daniel
yeah,
Jones.
yeah. He's that
He's got
prototype.
he's gonna win the Senior Bowl MVP. That's just what these types of quarterbacks do.
For you degenerate gamblers out there, if there's somebody out, I'm sure there's somebody betting on who's going to win the Senior Bowl MVP. Like this guy's definitely a candidate. He's got that prototype. Look, he's another one like Rattler, who I think is a useful player. Like I think in the NFL, he has a role backing up a guy like if Daniel Jones is starting quarterback somewhere, backing up Daniel Jones, even backing up a guy like Josh Allen. Like
Justin
kind of like
Herbert.
just like like a big prototype who can kind of operate the short area. He doesn't have the elite arm strength to stretch the field, but he can move the stick. He can move the chains, using the short game and his like kind of like Taysom Hill like running ability,
Yep.
I think that there's a role for this guy. Is he a starter in the NFL? I think he has more potential to start than Spencer Rattler does. I do believe that because I think he's a better decision maker than Spencer Rattler in the passing game. So I think that translates a little bit better. Uh, I think his arm strength is ultimately going to keep him limited. Like even if he's a starter, I think he's a back half of the NFL type of starter.
Yeah.
You have any
So
more thoughts on this guy?
so yeah, I agree with everything you said. The only thing I really had to add to that is like, I agree. He has like good zip in like the short to intermediate area, but I think 15 yards and kind of on, you see that what sudden looked like good zip on the on shorter plays. Suddenly, like you see that ball start to kind of die in the air, and that's definitely worrisome to me. He There seems like to be a cap on where he can really continue to zip that ball in there, and then I see on a lot of his deep throws. Although, the wide receiver can come down with it, a lot of times it looks like they're working back to the football, like when he throws it deep. He puts it up there with enough air underneath it that the wide receiver has a chance to come back and get it, but he's not. I don't see him just kind of hit these guys in stride very often. Maybe not. Shouldn't say very often, but too often I see him not hit them in stride. Is probably the right way to put it.
Oh, sorry, I lost you for a second. Yeah, I would agree with all
Yep.
that. Somewhat limited right now, but I think a good football player, a guy who I think can have a long NFL career, Ju- um, and I think can replace some of the backups in the NFL. And remember, not every quarterback is meant to be like a top 15 quarterback. You saw in the NFL this year so many injuries. These guys who are back end and third string quarterbacks were having to start. Teams have to win football games, so these guys matter. Guys like Spencer Rattler and guys like Michael Pratt are going to have an impact in the NFL. You want guys like this littering the league and having an opportunity to play. So that's all I have to say about Pratt. I think those are the two quarterbacks we're going through, and obviously not as exciting as going through Caleb Williams and Drake May. But come on, guys, we've already done that. So,
Yeah.
and they're not going to show up at the Senior Bowl. Um, let's move on. What do you say?
Yeah,
We
let's
only
do it.
we only have one running back that we're going over this week. And it is Marshawn Lloyd from USC, 5'9", 210 pounds, fourth-year player, four-star recruit, transferred from South Carolina, coincidentally. Um, this year he had 820 rushing yards, 7.1 yards per carry. So this guy has been generating a lot of juice, nine touchdowns on the ground, 13 receptions for 232 receiving yards. Monty, tell me what you like about Marshawn Lloyd.
So, just to add on for people who might be an audio listener or even if you're watching, just look at here. This guy has some very impressive grades. Just to kind of add on to the stats, a 93 gap grade, a 177 elusive grade, yards after contact per attempt 3.97, almost 4 yards per attempt after contact. He has 47 missed tackles forced. It's very and only one drop for a guy who's a bit of a receiving back. So also very impressive. That kind of shows who he is. I mean, that is he's like a quick, elusive runner. He's a guy who can be a receiving threat for your team. Is good vision, good contact balance. He like, showed he has good yards after contact. A guy that I'm a big fan of and Bucky Irving. He kind of brings a lot of this to the table. It's a prototype of running back that I really like to have on your team somewhere. And I think that he brings that. The difference between Bucky Irving and him, Bucky Irving is a guy that I like and I think is more impressive of a player. But I mean, this guy's 5'9", 210. That's NFL size. That's there's been bell cows who have been that size. I don't necessarily know if Marshawn Lloyd will be a bell cow, but he has more of a stature to hold up and do that. He's a thicker guy. So he's an interesting player. He's the data loves him. He's uh he's just a fun player, and it seems like these guys always find a role on teams. What do you think about Marshawn Lloyd?
Yeah, I really liked him. Really useful player. That's how I would describe him. He's an offensive weapon. Modern mold of running backs. I think that you're going to see more and more coming out. Definitely in that Bucky Irving mold. Whereas Bucky Irving has the size and frame that's more akin to a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, maybe a little bit undersized, but he makes up for it with all of his incredible athleticism. Maybe I think I would say that Lloyd is not quite the athlete as Bucky Irving, but he makes up for it in size. I think overall he's a really good running back. I mean, I think so as a traditional running back, I think he does a good job in like both zone and gap schemes. On inside zone, he's pretty solid when he sees the blocks open up of hitting that hole and pushing forward and falling forward and getting yards after contact that way. Um, when he's asked to run in gap schemes where he's using his lateral agility, he has the speed and lateral agility to make plays, and you see he generates a lot of explosive plays doing that. He's a good receiver. I think if there's a knock on him is he does a little bit too much dancing behind the line of scrimmage, and he waits for blocks to open up a little bit more than anticipating them. I think some of the best running backs kind of know they see the block opening up before it happens, and they're ready to hit the hole as it opens up, and they generate that much more yardage. He's a guy who I think has to wait a little bit more, and there's a little hesitation in that. And he does tend to dance a little bit, and he'll have negative yardage plays. Nothing crazy. I think that you see that a lot with home run hitting backs. I think you tend to see that kind of tendency, right? They wait, they're a little patient, and then they stay a little longer behind the line of scrimmage than you want them to down. But their general approach is they're looking to hit a home run, and I think this guy's trying to do that. So he's a good player. I think ultimately he's a player that you could see the Giants targeting. I think his grade is going to put him somewhere in like that early day three kind of range. So right where you kind of think about taking running backs. Um, any other thoughts on Marshawn Lloyd before we move on?
One thing I'd say is it seems to fit the prototype also of what Joe Shane tends to look for. I mean, you noticed that Joe Shane was really into a guy like James Cook. That's what we
Hmm.
all heard his first year here. A guy that he drafted when he was in Buffalo, Devin Singletary. I think Devin Singletary is a guy who fits a lot of what we're saying Marshawn Lloyd guys. Contact balance, yards after contact, receiver, kind of a shorter, stouter guy. I think he kind of fits in that mold. So I could definitely see us being interested in a guy like Marshawn Lloyd.
Yep, I agree.
All right. All right. So we'll move on to our next guy. All right. And I'll introduce this guy.
Yep.
Xavier Legette. I know it's a guy that a lot of people are fans of, and we definitely were excited to break him down out of South Carolina, 6'3", 227 pounds. He was actually a quarterback in high school. He was a four-star athlete, and he is a fifth-year player. And he kind of broke out this year in his fifth year with 71 receptions, 1,255 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. So why don't you go ahead and tell him about Xavier Legette, Sal?
I'll tell you the bad first, because you're going to hear about it with Xavier Legette. He's older. I think he's close to 24 years old. He's an older prospect. Maybe he's 23, something like that. So some of these guys are a lot younger than him. Um, that's the bad. The only other bad is that I would say that well. I'm going to get into all the good. If I have to knock him for a couple of things, he struggles a little bit on the release and getting early separation and separating from DBs. That's it. That's all I got in terms of negative. Here are the positives. The guy is an absolute freaking bully. I mean, he is a big, strong, fast athlete. He's been clocked as fast as 22 miles per hour, which is ridiculous for a dude his size. He is a good route runner. I don't think he's an elite route runner, but he's a solid route runner. He has a fairly good route tree. Um, Play after play, you see him running with DBs in his hip pocket the whole time. He almost lets them do it. Ball comes his way, doesn't matter. He wins. He wins because he's bigger than them. He's stronger than them. He shields the ball very well when it's coming his way. He uses his frame. He uses extension. He uses his enormously strong hands, and he just wins. He's a contested catch warrior. I don't know if there's more juice in this guy because of the lack of separation that you tend to see on film. Like, I don't know if this guy is going to be like that elite wide receiver, like who who does all these things and separates. But as you mentioned to me before we started this, he's one of those guys who's always open. He's open even when he's not open because if he's on the field, the ball's got to go his way, and I think that's the kind of prototype he is. You had an interesting comp for him. Why don't you tell me what you think?
Yeah, man. When I was watching like Xavier Legette, it's funny. I hear a lot of people compare Xavier Legette to AJ Brown because AJ Brown's that thicker build wide receiver, but he reminded me a lot actually of his teammate at Ole Miss, and that's DK Metcalf. I mean, and from a size comparison, I went and looked it up. I'm like, this guy he has a DK Metcalf look. I'm like, maybe DK Metcalf was bigger than this guy, but like, let me check. I was like, was DK Metcalf like 240, 6'5"? No, he was 6'3", 228, and that's this guy's 6'3", 227. They're like the exact same size. DK Metcalf ran a 4.33. This guy's rumored to run like borderline 4.3, late high 4.2s. Like that's what they're saying. Like this guy, and he's so long, he's so strong, he just bullies D-backs, like, whether, he's just working, like, a few yards off the line of scrimmage where they can, hand fight a little bit more, he just can fucking toss him around, if he's blocking, he just absolutely separates them and can bury guys, it's speaking of Ole Miss guys, like, a guy who rose up the draft board a lot last year was the guy Jonathan Mingo, despite he had kind of a lack of production. Just because he had the size people look for. He's 6'2", 220. I think Xavier Legette, I mean, he has some special size. And I think that DK Metcalf comp is going to be more prevalent. The one concern with him that you mentioned already, is he did nothing, and I mean nothing until this year. He had 18 receptions for 167 yards last year in 2022. That was the high. That was the high of his entire career. And breakout age is a really important predictor of success. So it does make me worry about Xavier again. As much as he does excite me, and I would be thrilled to have him as giant, there would be part of me that's like, just from a data analytical standpoint, that's like, may I'd be okay with somebody else taking him just so I don't have to like risk that from just a pure data standpoint. But from a physical specimen, this guy's impressive to me.
Yeah, I mean he's solid, man. He's good in the deep. He's got a good deep ball production rate. He's got good yards per route run. He's over 3 yards there. He wins contested catches at about a 50% clip. He doesn't drop the ball. He's only got drops the ball like 2% of the time, which is
Right.
insane when you think about like how the dude plays football. Like he plays with somebody who draped on him the whole time, and he only drops it 2% of the time. That's just a testament to the strength of his hands. Um,
Very strong hands.
this guy's an NFL receiver. I think he's a prototypical X receiver in the NFL. You stick him on the outside, say use your speed, use your strength, bully the hell out of people. The ball's coming your way. I don't really care if you're open or not. Just go get
Yeah.
it. And he's a guy like you can just see in the NFL just leaping up in the air and snatching the ball out of the air, and nobody can do anything about it. Like and I think this is a guy who, despite the concerns about his age, his stock will be protected by his testing. I really think he's going to
Yeah.
blow up the combine. Like
100%. I agree.
yeah, he's
Um,
explosive. Like you can see it on film. Like he's an explosive athlete, and I'm psyched. Now I don't think he's going to do great in the Senior Bowl. Let me say this: the
okay.
Senior Bowl, it does not favor these types of receivers. When you're doing these one-on-one drills and you have these really quick, fluid DBs, if you have like kind of a guy who's used to winning contested catches and they do these one-on-one drills, these guys are they don't look like they're separating. They're not doing anything that's outstanding. The guys who look really good on these drills in the Senior Bowl are the Calvin Austins, the Wandell Robinsons, those kinds of guys, right? Like these shiftier, quicker guys who separate like incredibly fast on one-on-one. That doesn't necessarily translate to anything in the NFL. And the fact that you don't separate in those drills doesn't necessarily translate to failure in the NFL. I just don't think those Senior Bowl drills do these guys justice. If he does do well in the Senior Bowl drills, then watch his stock explode because everything else is there for him.
Yeah. And to be fair, he will definitely get some hype at the Senior Bowl just for other reasons. I mean, one, they now have these guys GPSed. This guy's going to be off the charts on the GPS in practice. And the other one is just for not for us, who are at home, but for the people who are going to the Senior Bowl, for the scouts, for the fans, shout out Talking Giants guys, they'll be down there. When they see this guy, people are going to be like, wow, like he is a specimen. And this can be, I'm sure it's gonna be cool to see that guy in person because you can see it on tape.
Absolutely. All right, man. Should we go to the next guy?
Yeah, let's hit it.
All right. I'm going to introduce our next guy here. Another wide receiver, a guy I'm very excited about discussing, somebody I wish we were able to talk about earlier in the year. This is Tez Walker from North Carolina, 6'2.5", really 6'3", 200 pounds, fourth-year player, three-star recruit. He had transferred from NC Central and then Akron to North Carolina. He had to miss some games due to this NCAA rule about his eligibility. It's a whole big typical NCAA bullshit kind of process story, but either way, he played 8 games this year, had 41 receptions, 699 yards, and 7 touchdowns, playing primary target to Drake May. Monty, tell me about Tez Walker.
Tez Walker is just a good wide receiver, man. I mean, I think that's the best way to put it. I'm unsure about how great of an athlete he is. I couldn't quite get a vibe for it, and I'm interested to see how he tests, but I'm confident that he has everything you want from just a wide receiver. Like he I don't think he's necessarily elite in anything, but he does everything well. He has very good hands. He has a good has good release. He has good footwork. He's a solid route runner. He's very crisp and controlled in his route running. I'll say like one thing I really like about him, especially like when he's doing like curls and things like that, is you see a lot of these guys when they're running their routes, kind of when they get to their break, you see kind of like a chop of the feet to move. His is just smooth. It's just if he wants to change directions, he just does. Like he can just flip around. There's no chopping of the feet really. He just steps into it and smoothly turns around and comes back like it was a string attached to his chest, and he just kind of whips around. Very very good route running in that sense. Like a lot of it's just like innate like athleticism, I think, but other parts of each, I think he was just coached very well on that aspect where a lot of these kids are taught like kind of that choppy feet, but that's really more how you're supposed to do it. That's how you see these top end wide receivers do it. That was really impressive to me, especially for a guy of his size at 6'2.5". He's a big wide receiver who plays like a smaller guy. You know, like I said, he's really really good at everything. Really good hands. I'll let you go into him because I know you're a big fan, but I just ultimately think he's going to be a good NFL wide receiver.
Yeah. Let me go through some of my notes real quick, and then I'll tell you what I really like about the guy. So I wrote excellent release at the snap. I think unlike Legette, who I don't think has the best release package at the snap, I think Walker's pretty damn good getting release and separation early. He like you mentioned, he's smooth. I think he's a little more explosive than you may think in and out of his breaks at the stem. I think he does a good job of accelerating through the stem. I think he does the same thing at the catch point. He's a very good route runner. I agree with you. He's a crisp route runner, not elite, but just he runs the routes like really on a in a nice controlled way. Um, what I really was impressed with him, watching him with playing with Drake May was how well he was able to always find like soft spots in zone. Like he always found like just enough like room for the ball to get there to give a nice throwing angle for his quarterback. Now some of that is just Drake May. Like you find yourself watching a guy make these plays where like he's running in a zone between like three guys and he's catching the ball right in the right spot. Part of it is him getting there. The other part is Drake May throwing with anticipation and throwing him open. So it's sometimes it's hard to judge that when you've got a quarterback who has that kind of natural ability. But I'm not taking it away from the receiver. He helped his quarterback and he was always reliable. And it's something we talked about with Jordan Addison last year. Not that he's Jordan Addison. I don't think he's that. But it's something we gave Jordan Addison credit for. Like it showed up on tape constantly, right? How he always found the soft spots in zone. There was nothing explosive about Jordan Addison. He was just smooth, right? He was a smooth route runner, always found the soft spots. And you're seeing it translate in the NFL. We talked about this. Route running matters. Smoothness of route running, reliability, finding soft spots, that stuff translates in the NFL. And you see what Jordan Addison is doing as a rookie. Like he's clearly, we were big. I think he was wide receiver, essentially wide receiver 1 or 2 for both of us, and we were I think higher on him than a lot of other people. And he was wide receiver 4 taken, and he's been the best rookie wide receiver of this class, right? And other than Puka, I guess
Yeah.
Puka, Puka, that's a whole different story. But
Mhm.
of those top guys, so these route runners, I think, are always good bets, right? Like guys who
Agreed.
run good routes, find like soft spots in the zone. He does all of that. A couple other quick notes. He has outstanding body control. You see him at the catch point. He shields. He uses his big frame to shield DBs, get the ball in front of him, frames his catches nicely, uses his wingspan to high point a lot. And when he gets the ball in stride, which is frequently with Drake May, he does seem to have a little bit of an extra gear at the end to like accelerate away from people. And he doesn't use it all the time, but he has it. He has that in his toolbox. So I really like this guy, man. I think he has wide receiver 1 upside. I really do. But at minimum, I think this guy's a really kind of high end wide receiver 2. At
Yeah.
minimum. Yeah.
I see that. I'll say it's funny you mentioned Jordan Addison because he's a great route runner, but his teammate last year, or was I assume was his teammate last year. He was I don't know if he was at North Carolina. Maybe it wasn't his teammate last year because I think he just transferred. But anyway, Josh Downs, North Carolina.
Hmm.
It was another guy who they developed to be a really good route runner. He was just a technician. He was a smaller guy, but he was a guy who did everything well last year. Obviously different sizes, they're different type players. I I can see what you're saying about some explosives like in and out of at the stem, but I also think where I saw it was like he just doesn't lose any speed in and out of the stem. I don't necessarily see him like absolutely exploding out of it, but like he absolutely loses no speed when he's making a break, which is another thing that's super impressive, and I think he does really well. Some other things I just had for some last second notes. He, I, what you said, to what you said earlier, I think he fights for leverage really well when he's running down the field and doing his routes. He's constantly working to get leverage out of the defensive back, and I noticed him doing that constantly. Thought he had really good concentration, especially on the deep ball. I mentioned just like flips his hip super quick, but yeah, man, I'm with you. I think he's a really good player. I'm not positive on the upside, but I'm confident he can be a starting wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah. I think that's where I land too. I think there's more there, but I think that at minimum, he's a very reliable starting wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah.
So, all right. Let's go to our next wide receiver. I forgot who introduced the last guy. Did I introduce the last guy? I did. I think why don't you introduce our next guy?
All right. Our next guy, Lad McConkey out of Georgia. 5'11", 185 pounds. He's a fourth-year player. He was a three-star recruit. And in high school, he played quarterback, running back, wide receiver, defensive back, and was their kick returner. And in 9 games this year, he had 30 receptions for 478 yards and 2 touchdowns. I know those stats don't sound overly impressive, but Sal, why don't you talk to him a little about Lad McConkey?
He was hurt. He missed a bunch of games at the beginning of the year. Injuries kind of derailed some of his production this year, but you saw it on tape last year. You saw it on tape his first year. Lad McConkey is just a good football player. Like that's how I would describe him. He's just a damn good football player. So he's a smooth route runner. I think people pigeonhole him as the slot guy, but he lines up outside a lot, and he's got the size to handle it on the outside. He's got enough bulk to his frame that I think he can win on the outside, at least semi-consistently. So he's versatile, I think, is the way to put it in where he lines up. He's another guy that's just a really damn good route runner, finds a soft spot in zone very easily, has really good footwork, not like really one of the best release packages of all these receivers. Like at the snap, this guy has all sorts of different release packages and immediately generates separation, which is, I think, in his bag of tricks. He's used in motion a lot by that Georgia offense. And I think one of the things I noticed that I appreciate in receivers, and you see it over on tape over and over and over again with McConkey, is the dude is a good blocker. Like he's an asset in your short passing game and in your run game, because he gets out there and he gets physical with guys who are either his size or bigger, and he's able to hold his own. If you watch Georgia football, Carson Beck was basically throwing like checkdowns well, maybe not checkdowns, but short passes all year. That was their offense as they developed him. And there was a lot of like quick game with Carson Beck, and Lad McConkey was often like the critical blocker on a lot of these plays, and he did a good job. So I think he's just a damn good football player. Wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type guy to me in a good wide receiver room, but he's got a job in the NFL, a starting job. Just as a really good route runner, good blocker, good overall football player. You want guys like this on your team. So I really like Lad McConkey. Do you have
Yeah,
any
man.
thoughts on this guy beyond that?
Not much beyond that. You pretty much nailed it. I think he's a guy who's going to do really well at the Senior Bowl. I think he's a
Yeah,
guy that
he's the
teams
kind of
will
guy.
love. He,
He's the kind of guy that's going to cook DBs at the
yep.
if he's
He's
healthy, he's going to do things like that. Yeah,
Yeah, he has great feet. He's very smooth. He's going to cook DBs in one-on-one. So I think he's going to do well up there. Like I say, his inside outside versatility. So he'll be able to show that both off there. He's a competitive guy. Uh, all that will show up. And also say to the stats where they don't sound that impressive. Mixed between injuries and a Georgia team that ran the ball a lot. His yards per route run was 3.26, which is like elite numbers. That's yards per route run is something that we continue to bring up because it's a very predictive number, and that is a very, very good number. He only had a drop rate of 6.3%. Again, very, very solid number. Contested catch rate of 40%. Very, very solid number. So he is a good football player. He lines up everywhere. They had him in motion a lot. He was a really helpful piece in that Georgia offense who, you know, obviously they had Brock Bowers, who was their main guy, but after that it was led. He'll be an asset to whatever football team drafts him. I have no doubt about it.
let me give you just to give you an illustration of how important that number is in terms of finding gems or predicting success. Um, I pulled up Puka Nakua, who went in the 5th round. Did you
Yep.
ever look at his stats from last year?
I don't remember what they were at least.
So Puka Nakua's yards per route run, 3.53.
Yep.
His contested catch rate, 50%. He had a 5.9% drop percentage. He had 3 drops all year. When you look at the data, like it was screaming, draft this guy. Draft this guy. And his film was good. Like it wasn't outstanding, but it was good. But the data liked him. The data's not everything. You gotta merge it with like what you see with your eyes. But sometimes like there are little gem stats in there that sometimes give you an idea of how productive a guy might be. So there's another example of it. I just pulled it up while we were talking. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
similar yards per route run, similar drop rate, similar contested catch rate. I said it, we were in one of our group chats at one point. Somebody asked like, who's going to be the Puka Nakua of this draft? I'm like, Lad McConkey is a guy who I could see being the Puka Nakua of this draft. That it wouldn't surprise me.
Right.
There's
Although he's not going to go in the
similar.
5th round. I think
No,
McConkey's going to go in the second, latest, early 3rd round kind of
yeah,
range.
I agree, but he has kind of that prototype to him.
Absolutely. All right. Let's go to our next guy, Monty. That concludes our wide receiver series for this episode. So we got a few more guys to go. We're going to position. We have one tight end on this group. There were 2 choices we could have gone through. I made my case for my guy, but Monty said you're not allowed to talk about him for the 17th time this year.
That's what I said.
Sinnott. Draft Ben Sinnott. No, all right. I'm not going to go over Ben Sinnott again. Here's a guy that we should go over, though. Jaheim Bell, Florida State, 6'3", 239-pound, four-star recruit, fourth-year player. The transfer from South Carolina. Monty, tell me why you love Jaheim Bell.
Jaheim Bell he's an interesting player, man. He's fun to watch. He's not like he doesn't have like these crazy stats. He had like, he said 503 receiving yards. I mean, that's tight ends at college. Tight ends don't typically do anything nuts, but when you watch him and you see how Florida State utilizes him, that's the fun part about him, man. He's a chess piece. That's the first note I wrote is he is a chess piece. They play him everywhere. You see him in the backfield. You see him line up at tight end. You see him lined up as a stand-up slot. You see him lined up as an outside wide receiver. And I'm not saying like one time a game. Like he's doing this consistently. They have him never in like the same spot, like 2 plays in a row. He is a guy that constantly have him in motion, blocking, in motion, and getting the ball so he can, take off. He's 8.1 yards after catch this year per reception. So like that's 12th in the country among tight ends. Very good. 12 missed tackles forced. That's 8th in the country among tight ends. These are really numbers I really like to see in tight ends because I think that's it's hard to, look at these guys and be like, oh, well, he had a lot of yards. He'll be good in the NFL. But when you see these tight ends who are good in the NFL, they are athletes and they're good after the catch. And that's things to look for. He does that. He's versatile. I say he's a willing blocker. I don't necessarily know if he's a great blocker, but he can chip block well. He can you get him in motion. He can get his body in front of a guy. I'm not going to put him in line and expect him to block defensive linemen, but he's a good blocker. I have no problem with it. But he's an athlete. That's about all I have. The only other thing I had is in South Carolina before he came here. They legitimately used him as like a running fullback. I think he had like 300 yards rushing there, 200 yards, something like that. So what do you have on?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Florida State using this guy on jet sweeps.
Yeah.
He's fast. He's really fast and he's versatile and he's a modern, chess piece tight end, which I think you need on your team. You probably need a couple of these guys on your team. I think the days of the fullback are coming back. Shout out Carmen Brasillo. You pulled up the, giving like a tutorial on use of fullbacks in the modern NFL. And not that we're going to draft a bunch of fullbacks, but the modern NFL fullback is a tight end, right? The H-back. And he fits that piece, right? Like he often is lined up as like in that sniffer role, right? He's lined up in the backfield where you don't know if he's actually going to be part of the passing game. Is he running the ball or is he blocking? Because he's so versatile, he can do all three of them. You're right. You wrote willing blocker. In my notes, I wrote chip blocker. I think that's how they used him essentially when he was in line, was to assist on chip blocks and then release on into a route. I didn't see much of a route tree for this guy. I don't think they necessarily used him that way in Florida State. His routes were largely things like screens and outlet passes and leaks and things like that. But
Lance.
but I think that I saw enough athleticism that I think that this is a guy who can have a functional route tree in the NFL, with good tight end coaching. Because I don't see any I don't see any physical limitations that would stop him from doing that. What I was taken aback by this guy was his speed. Like, you don't see a lot of tight ends move with this kind of speed. Like, he's very fast, and he runs like a running back, right? I mean, he runs like a running back, and so I'm impressed by his versatility. This is the kind of guy where like you can draft him and call him whatever the hell you want, tight end, fullback, you know. But you put him on the field, and I think he gives you versatility in the look you're showing the other team. They don't know what he's doing. And that's a useful person to have on the field. We talked about that with like Isaiah Simmons when the Giants got him, right? Like you don't know what he's doing when he's on the field, and that gives you a chess piece. And this chess piece is the same. So I really like him. The other guy we didn't discuss, my guy, I've talked about him for the same reason. These kind of players are useful. And I think that, as we get into, kind of countering where these really good NFL defenses are going, which is getting into these versatile looks, having a chess piece is important. So I wouldn't mind a guy like Jaheim Bell on the Giants, honestly. I
Fun.
don't know I don't know how they're gonna use him in the Senior Bowl, but, like, what do you think? What are your thoughts on him and his role potentially on the Giants, or if they would even consider taking this guy?
Yeah, I mean, if if we Giants took him, I assumed he would play kind of that fullback tight end hybrid, and I assume Bellinger would kind of go more back to just a blocking tight end, just straight up in line, and would do less of that fullback type stuff. They would be creative with him, I'm sure. We have creative offensive minds, and I'm sure they would move him around. Couple other stats I want to mention on him before we move on. 1.96 yards per route run for a tight end. Very
That's
good.
good.
It's almost 2 yards per route run. Very,
And that's it's like almost 90th percentile or so, right?
yeah, it's very, very good. The bar is much lower in tight ends. 9.3% drop rate.
Not
Not
good.
good, not awful. Like some of that.
It's below average for
Yeah.
a tight end. Yeah.
Contested catch rate 50%. It's good. If making 50-50 balls 50-50. So like that's what you want. But yeah, do you have anything else on this guy?
The stats, I think you mentioned it, but the yak and the missed tackles. I think those numbers are
Yeah.
really good for a tight. Those matter for a tight end. Like, can you force missed tackles? Can you get yak? I mean, he gets 8.1 yak per reception. That's outstanding. You know,
Yep.
that's really outstanding. And he had 12 forced missed tackles. That's again outstanding. So I think that's a testament to his athleticism and his speed. Um,
Mm.
this guy is gonna. I mean, they're projecting him to be like kind of like a mid to late day three guy. You could do worse than adding a talent like this in the middle to end of day three to your team.
Yeah. I'd
I
love him in a Shanahan offense. He'd be great in
yeah,
a Shanahan offense.
he's very versatile. I think. I mean, but why not in our offense, right? I think our offense has
Yeah.
more capability than that. So
Mhm.
um, I just like players like this. But yeah, that's it on him. Let's go to the next guy. I think you're
Get to the
introducing
big
our next dude.
boys.
All right, so we're done with all the position with the skill players. Now it's time for the monsters. So why don't you introduce our first monster?
All right, as I probably butcher his name, but Taliese Fuaga. I would just call him Fuaga. I don't know his first name, but offensive tackle out of Oregon State, 6'6", 334 pounds. Is a fourth year player. He was a 3-star recruit. Um, no stats because he's offensive line. Why don't you tell us about Fuaga?
Fuaga is getting a lot of love. He's viewed as one of the top tackles in this class. I've seen him ranked anywhere from like top 15 to like top 25 in overall draft grade. He's a right tackle at Oregon State. This guy is a bruiser. He's your throwback, beat you up, maul you kind of right tackle. He's a monster in the run game. And he plays with kind of like that mean streak where he finishes his tackle, finishes his blocks. He grinds you into the ground and wants to like come back for the kill later. Like he's got that mentality. Um, he's got a good solid anchor. He's got good leverage. He's got a lot of things you like in that way. Where he I think where you and I maybe differ from the consensus on him, we both kind of felt like I don't necessarily see the lateral agility and the athleticism necessarily in that lateral agility way to like make me feel super confident this guy's going to be a great offensive tackle. I think he's going to be a very good offensive tackle, but I think there are some limitations in how far he can how far he can get in his lateral agility and how he can take away wide rushes and um, I think speed rushers and these things like there are issues there that I think do show up on tape. So I have some concerns about him. You had a few more thoughts. What do you think about this guy?
Yeah, man. So I don't know what they're coaching over there because I did notice it with some of their guys, but this guy gets no depth in pass protection. He gets no depth. He kind of takes a step back and it's almost like he's chopping his feet. He has a strong, powerful punch where he can stun these defenders, but and I don't think I've ever seen him getting beaten on the inside. But I've seen him get beat on the outside. You get a speed rusher who kind of get a step on him before he can get their hands on him. He just doesn't get the depth, and he doesn't have kind of like the speed to really get out to him and stop him, and he kind of gets turned around. And I don't know how he's going to play in the NFL, getting them the depth that he gets at the college level. He really doesn't get any if you watch him. I probably more of a coaching thing. The lateral speed is not. It worries me. I'm sure NFL offensive line coaches can say that, like, hey, I can teach that. No worries. They see a guy who gave up no sacks over, at least I can see the last 3 years here at Oregon State. He a mauler in the run game, um, but he has a really good anchor. But to me, I see a guy. I could be wrong. Maybe he can get fixed. They say a lot of guys have to go play guard and stuff like that, and some guys I don't agree with. I haven't seen it get mentioned, Fuaga. I think he'd be a good guard, and I don't know if he can hold up at tackle. I could see him getting taken advantage of in the NFL, but I think he'd be a hell of a guard for a guy who has such an anchor, such a powerful punch, such a guy who doesn't get beat on the inside, like such a mauler in the run game. I think he'd be an awesome guard. I think he might get abused at tackle.
Yeah, I so we're getting closer and closer to the combine season, the testing season, after the Senior Bowl. And for those who are unaware, there are different tests that measure athletic ability and strength that I think some are useful for some position groups, some are useful for others. I think ubiquitously the short shuttle is used as a way to gauge the lateral agility and quickness of offensive linemen, and it's a fairly good predictor of your ability to move as a lineman, often differentiating the tackles from the guards, right? Um, and I think his testing is going to be really important because I suspect that we'll see what he does in the Senior Bowl, but and people love this guy on tape. But like you said, some of that is scheme, some of that is coaching. We don't know. Maybe he's capable of more. But if he doesn't test well in the short shuttle, if he has a slow time and he shows some slow lateral agility, I think you're going to start hearing more talks of is this guy going to last a tackle in the NFL? Like, does he have that kind of quickness? And just from what I saw on tape, I know people love the way he finishes in the run game, but you hear this about guys like Evan Neal, right? I mean, you don't know until you actually test them. You don't know until you actually put them through NFL speed. So I have some concerns here. I think in every other part of his game, he's great. He really is. He's an outstanding tackle. He's a great run blocker, very good pass blocker. Doesn't get beat inside, doesn't get bullied. You can't go through him. Um, but the question is, if you try to go around him, can he catch you? And I think that's the big concern.
And I think something that's gonna be great for seeing the Senior Bowl, he's gonna get in these one-on-ones,
Mm-hmm.
and those are tough for offensive tackles, offensive linemen in general. It's not fair to them. But if he's going to get abused if he doesn't get his depth and be ready to use his athleticism to beat these guys. So
I,
we'll
I
see,
have
man.
a, I don't wish this upon the kid, but I have a feeling he may struggle in these drills. Just from what we saw on tape, I wouldn't be shocked if those wide, edge rushes give him some fits.
Yep.
But anyway, we'll see. I mean, you never know until they actually get out there and try. So this is a guy who I think the Senior Bowl can be very revealing for, and I really believe the combine testing, athletic testing, is going to tell us a lot about him.
Mhm.
Um, that's it for him, though. That's all I have. Interesting prospect. Next guy, let me introduce him.
Yep.
Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma, 6'7", 328-pound TCU transfer, fourth-year player, three-star recruit. Big hulking human being, long arms, like Mr. What was his name, Mr. Plastic or whatever his name was, or
Uh, elastic.
Elastic
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. So tell us about Tyler Guyton, Monty.
Tyler Guyton is an interesting prospect. I mean, you mentioned the size, 6'7", 328 pounds. I mean, some things I had here right away. I said he's athletic. I say he's strong as an ox. Like, this guy is athleticism pops, which sometimes not the easiest thing for to see an offensive lineman. They're only moving so much, and they're these big guys, but his athleticism pops. he is a guy when he gets his hands on you, he can toss you. He is extremely strong. I wanted to kind of get those out of the way because I don't like him outside of basically projecting him, man. I don't really see the first round hype with him. Um, but I get it in some senses because I understand like these NFL coaches are going to want to get their hands on him. But I'll tell you some of my concerns with him. He has almost no bend. When he's lined up, he's standing almost straight up. His knees are bent, but that's it. He's not bent at the waist at all. It's just a little bit at the knees. Um, he lets defenders straight into his body. He doesn't have a good punch to keep him off him. He just lets him right in. Um, he leans forward a lot in the run game. He doesn't bring in necessarily his hips with him. Um, Really bad hand placement. I see his hands constantly placed on the defenders' backs and outside their shoulders. That's going to get flagged. Say he could be better in space. I see him, get into space and not get a line up his defender well, miss him, or not really have him where you can make a play on him. I see him miss assignments. I mean, I mentioned a little bit like in the run game, but also in the pass game on like stunts and things like that. I'll see him, not take the guy he's supposed to. Ultimately, what I wrote was I said he needs to be coached up, but I do see the vision. Um, I mean, I think what I said here is kind of shows up anybody who's watching right now. He's really bad PFF grades. And he has a 72.9 pass block grade, but everything else is below 65. So, just not impressive. What do you have about Tyler Guyton?
I think Tyler Guyton fits the mold of other Oklahoma monsters that have come out. The Planet Theory guys, they produce these guys in bulk. Um,
Yeah.
and so it reminds me of guys like Orlando Brown. To some extent, going way back, Trent Williams, although Trent Williams was a much, 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 much better blocker and a much better athlete. But these are big dudes with long wingspans and have like the kind of projectable, coachable frame that you could turn with good coaching into a stud tackle. Um, I I see everything. I see all the requisite traits and athleticism you need in Tyler Guyton to turn him into an all pro. Like legit, I think this guy has all pro potential with everything he's got, right? But like you said, he needs work. He needs really good NFL coaching. If this guy goes to Bobby Johnson, he'll be out of the NFL in like a year, wherever Bobby Johnson lands.
I'm
If
just
he
to get launched in the sun, so we don't have to worry
Yeah,
about
I
him.
probably should stop. I'll stop taking shots at him. I'm sorry. He's
No,
unemployed.
no, you're good. Keep taking shots.
Okay, I will. But if he goes to, well, like what Bill Callahan did last year with Dewan Jones. That's what I keep
Yes.
thinking of when I think of this. Did you think
Uh-huh.
about that comp? Dewan Jones was like a guy who like humongous Planet Theory guy who had a lot of technical problems at Ohio State at right tackle. Bill Callahan gets his hands on him, and after like freaking camp, the dude looks like a 10-year starter, right? Um, this guy needs a difference maker coach. He really does. And if he does get that, watch out. The team I'm terrified is going to take him if they retain their O-line coach, which remains to be seen, is the Eagles. Like I can
Like,
with Lane Johnson on his last legs, I can see Jeff Stoutland getting his hands on this guy and doing horrible things to the league. Because he's a great coach, and he's a good technical coach, and that's what this guy
Oklahoma to
needs.
Oklahoma.
Yep. Or, I mean, you name it. Like there are some great coaches out there. Not a ton, but if one of the great coaches gets their hands on him, watch out, right? This
Mike
guy could be,
Munchak gets back in the league.
yeah. You can see guys like that saying, I want him. I don't think Callahan would want him at this point because they've got their right tackle, but they need I don't know they probably need a left tackle more than anything. I don't think Guyton,
I think
I mean,
Jedrick Wills is a free agent, isn't he? Or is it one more year?
I think he's a free agent. I think he's a free agent because he was in the Andrew Thomas class. So, I think he, and I don't, actually, I think they did pick up his fifth year option. I'm not sure. But wouldn't this have been his fifth year? Or next year's his fifth year? He came out in
Yeah,
20.
next year.
No,
So
hold up. 20, 21, 22, 23. Yeah, next year's his fifth year. So I'm pretty sure they picked up Will's fifth year option. Um, so, yeah, but I mean, I don't know where he's going to land, but he needs great coaching. That's where I'll leave with Guyton. But I think with great coaching, you're talking about all pro upside. This guy's all upside.
I
Huge,
wouldn't
huge range of outcomes.
I wouldn't take him in round 1.
I think he's going in round 1.
I think it's a mistake.
Yeah, but there are teams that have the coaches, right? That have a lot of faith in their coaches turning talent like this into really good players, you know? So I do think he's going to go in round
I
1 because
get
it's
that, but
hard to
there's
turn
like
it down.
yeah, I get that, but there's like 3 of them, and I would go ahead and let somebody else make the mistake or be like, I'll take him where you guys are. I'm not reaching him because I have a good coach. And if you want to take him early, you can ruin him, and I'll take him after you're done ruining him.
I don't know enough about the Giants' new coach to know if he's one of those guys. I get the impression he's probably not one of those guys. I think he's just he's probably a good coach. I don't
Yeah,
think he's like a difference maker or cheat code type guy. At least not that I know of. Um,
he's getting his hands on draft capital now. Let's see if he can do anything with it because he hasn't gotten draft capital in the past.
exactly. I want to see what he does with Evan Neal, and I want to see what he does with Izudu and JMS and these guys. But I digress. I think Guyton is a guy who needs a coach. That's the bottom line. I think he's got all pro potential. He needs a great coach.
Yep.
I think that brings us to our final guy. And
Yep.
we saved the best for last. All
Is the
right.
best.
So why don't you tell us about our last guy here?
All right, so this is a guy we've talked about plenty. We talked about him when we in our interior offensive line preview. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but Troy Fauntanu out of Washington, 6'4", 317 pounds. He's a fifth-year player. He was a 4-star guard. He's been playing tackle. He's been playing left tackle at Washington. But why don't you tell him about Troy Fauntanu?
We're going back many, many months to on He's a Giant to when we did our offensive tackle reviews back when we didn't have too many people watching. So thank you for all those who actually watched those episodes. Go back and watch them if you haven't watched them, by the way. Go watch all our episodes. They're really good, I promise you. There are a couple of them where I was sleepy, but other than that, they're pretty good. We record these late. No, Troy Fountain was a guy that we both loved, and I remember we reviewed him. I can't remember if we did him in the interior O line or offensive tackle review. I really can't remember where we placed him.
Check. He was in the thumbnail. He
But
was interior.
okay, so Fountain Out projects quote as a guard in the NFL because of things like his leverage and his base and his anchor, which is incredible. The dude you watch him, he's a sumo wrestler, like the way he's out
Mhm.
there with this wide base. He cannot be moved. Like he just cannot be moved when he's in his base. He's got like the leverage of a wrestler, the anchor of like a sumo wrestler, powerful hands, great feet, good footwork. Everything's in sync. Punch, feet, everything, leverage. He can move. He can move in space. He's athletic. He can move laterally. He's just so freaking good. And then I'm saying all this, and I'm like, why is this? And he plays left tackle at Washington. And then we start asking ourselves, like, why are they calling this guy a guard? I think he's a tackle, and he has actually, sometimes it's arm length. There's like requisite arm length. Like if you're under like certain certain benchmarks in arm length, they kind of grade you down and say if you're under like I think the number is like 33 inches or something like that, right? For arm length. Somewhere around there, they start getting worried. The scouts do. This guy's at what 36-inch arms, right? I
Yeah,
think
he has huge
he has
arms, huge
right. So
wingspan.
I'm like, well, so it's really just a height weight issue. I think that they hold against him, and they think that maybe he doesn't have quite the lateral agility you need to play left tackle, but I think he does. So he is a guy that, in my opinion, is technically sound in everything he does. He has a great anchor. He has great leverage. He plays like a wrestler. I don't care where you put this guy in the offensive line, he's going to be good. I think he's an outstanding guard. I mean, like all pro upside as a guard, really. Um, and I think he's a top end of the league starting right tackle. If you put him at right tackle, for example, I really believe that. Like, I think he's like at minimum, he's an average right tackle in the NFL, which is extremely valuable, right? So, I think he can play anywhere. So I'm not giving up on tackle for this guy. But what do you think about Troy Fountain now?
Yeah, man. I mean, after watching the 2 last guys we talked about, Fuaga being hyped as like, a top 15 pick and, Guyton being still first round pick and Botnu, they have going like second round and saying that he has to play guard. It's crazy to me, man. I would take him as a tackle over both those guys. I think
Agreed.
he is a fantastic football player. I would happily play him at guard. I'd happily play him at tackle. And like maybe he won't hold up at tackle. I could see why people question him at tackle. Like when he gets beat, it's because he's oversetting. And I think it's like you mentioned, he has really good lateral ability. I think he just kind of has too much trust in his ability to get back inside and beat him. And sometimes it doesn't always work. So the people their thought I think is really like, well, if he oversets, you stick him at guard, boom, it's problem solved. He won't overset anymore. And I don't think I mean, know who they also said that about? Tristan Wirfs. And he's been
Yep.
pretty damn good at tackle.
You know
Um,
also you know who else they said that about? Rashawn Slater. You know who else they
yep.
said that about? Peter Skoronsky. Like, and
And
he's playing guard right now, but I bet he could play tackle really well.
this is the next guy of that, except they're talking about as a second rounder instead of a top 10 pick like those guys. I really think I'm not saying he's that level, but I think he's way closer to that than people give it credit to. I think he's more Skoronsky level than he gets credit for. I think I might like him better than I like Skoronsky. Um, he like I said, I mean, you mentioned all these. What I know is that insanely technically sound, powerful, great feet, great punch, great feel and vision. When I say like great feel and vision, like I'll see him stick one hand out, work his edge, and then pass a guy off or whatever. He always is working and looking for what's coming next and making sure that he knows where his next assignment is. He has such great feel when he's playing the game. Like you said, he has fantastic leverage. He plays so low and he anchors so well because of that, and he gets out into space and he's constantly right with the perfect positioning on the guy he's supposed to take at the next level, and it kills him. I mean, he's so powerful. Like I said, we talked about lateral speed. He has his makeup speed where he can get right back inside if he needs to. I said with that, sometimes he can play a little bit out of control because, like, I mean, that's more to the point of just kind of oversetting. Is like even when it's working, sometimes it looks funky because he's playing with like 5 yards away from the guard sometimes when he gets out there, and it's just too much space, and he's kind of running all over the place. And it's a good show of his athleticism, but it's you don't love to see it. I'll say you look at these stats where his grades, he's a 61.9 run block grade, 59.6 zone grade, 57.4 gap grade. I don't see that. I think he's a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. They have him at 86.5 pass block grade. He's a very good pass blocker. I think he's an even better run blocker. I think he's an awesome run blocker. So, I mean, that's why it's important to watch the film too. But I love Troy Fauntanu.
Yeah.
This is a my guy if I've ever seen one.
Yep. And this is the kind of prototype of player that we have been advocating since the beginning that the Giants consider bringing into the loop one way or another. We don't know what we have yet in Evan Neal. We still freaking don't know. We had that episode talking about this issue, like we need to get a coaching evaluation of Evan Neal or a consulting evaluation. I think we had this conversation back in September. And here we are in January, and we still don't have an idea whether or not this guy can make it as an offensive tackle or if he's been properly coached. But here we are. So I think going into next season, we're still in a place of uncertainty. I'm hoping the new O-line coach gives us some clarity on this issue, but I don't think it hurts the Giants to get guys who can play tackle and play guard. I think that's your best bet here. Don't
And
overcommit to an early round tackle. Um, but like when I say early round, I mean like first round pick tackle if you can avoid it. And unfortunately, I think Troy Fauntanu is going to find his way into the first round. I agree with you. I think teams are not going to be able to, they're not going to miss on this. But guys like Fauntanu, if these are studs. Like these guys are difference makers on your O line. You can plug and play them pretty much anywhere except for like center. And I'm sure if you learn how to play center, you can do that well too.
probably.
Um, yeah, but these are just good players, and you want guys like this because they give you versatility. And I'm not into like moving guys around the line like that whole nonsense, which unfortunately I think the new coach does too, by the way.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, I don't want to think about it, but having guys who have guard tackle versatility specifically is valuable, right?
Yeah.
Because you can have a competition for the right tackle spot. Like you have a guy like Fountain for, let's just say, for argument's sake, play it out. We've talked about how strong this draft class is. Somebody is going to get pushed into the second round, right? Somebody's going to fall. I don't know who it's going to be. Fountain is definitely he's a candidate for that, right? There's a lot of good tackles in this class, a lot of good linemen, a lot of good receivers. There's a chance that like people are like, no, I'm betting on Fuaga and the other guys, and then this guy gets pushed, and the Giants are sitting there. Let's say they take their quarterback at pick 6, and then pick whatever it is, 39 or 38 comes up, wherever they're picking again. And Fauntanu sitting there, you could make a strong case that you add him to the mix and you say to Evan Neal, you guys are competing for the right tackle spot. Winner gets it, loser plays guard. So better learn how to play both, and I think that's quality addition of depth for your team. So I love this guy, and I love guys like him. I think Onwenu, who we talked about earlier, fits this mold. Fountain does. Jordan Morgan, I think, fits this prototype. But this is definitely the prototype I'm looking for in this draft class. I'm not looking for the pure tackles. I'm looking for these guys.
And I'll give you a dream scenario on the offensive line right here with all the guys we just mentioned. You go and sign a Micah Wenwu because you're not in the draft yet. You go out and get a guy who's a really good guard who has right tackle versatility. You luck out and you get Troy Fauntanu in the draft. Now what you do is you go, okay, I hope Evan Neal works out at right tackle. I have Michael Wenwu, who's played plenty of right tackle and healed, and they'll switch spots if worse comes to worse. And I'm going to train Troy Fauntanu at left guard, not even worry about cross training him as a rookie. And then you let those guys go back and forth. Worst case scenario, Evan Neal proves that he has to play guard. You have a Wenwu ready to play right tackle, but you didn't sign a Wenwu to play right tackle. You signed him to play guard. So what you do is you go, okay, next offseason, Fauntanu, you are a new tackle, and you have your future tackle already on the team, young, drafted, and you
That's
make that
interesting.
work. So like
Yeah.
you have those type of options on your team if you can do that type of
Yeah, I think if you wanted to add to, I think it makes sense that the Giants are going to have to add two offensive linemen this offseason at the minimum, right? I think
thing.
they're going to add some depth guys too, but in terms of two guys who can legit compete for starting spots, you could do a lot worse and pick some combination. I'll give you 4 names right off the bat, and getting 2 of these might be amazing. Micah Onwenu, Robert Hunt, Troy Fountain, Jordan Morgan. Those are 4 guys who all fit that exact prototype, right? They're tackles. They can play tackle, but they're outstanding. They translate as outstanding guards. I think getting 2 of those guys would make a huge impact. I'm thinking 1 free agent, 1 draft. You're probably spending an early second on this guy. And we're of course assuming the Giants still have their picks, all their picks in this scenario. We don't know what's going to happen, obviously, but I think this is the prototype you're looking for. You're not looking for Tyler Guyton, the pure tackle. You're not looking for Fuaga, although maybe he fits the bill. But I think he's going to be drafted
Yeah.
way too early.
Yeah, I agree.
But these are the guys. Any other thoughts on these guys? That's our 10.
That's our 10, man. We'll be back again with our next 10 next week. Defense next time.
Yep, we're gonna go back to 2 more episodes to go of the Senior Bowl series. We appreciate you guys listening. So we did 10 defense, 10 offense today. We'll do 10 defense next week. Finish off with 10 offense in the following week, and then we've done 40 prospects for you quickly in Senior Bowl, in addition to the whatever 69 or 70 some odd prospects we did before. And that's kind of it. There's no more Giant season left. It's all off season. Only news I'm looking for are who our coaches are going to be. I've told Monty this. I still have reservations about what our offensive coordinator position is going to look like. I'm still, until I hear confirmation that Mike Kafka is definitively back, I am concerned. I am very concerned about the future of our offensive coordinator. I want him back. All we've heard from the Giants is we intend to have him back, and then it was been radio silence since, because the Wink news is dominated. But that's the news I'm looking for. You're going to see this episode. We're going to do the live. You're watching this during the live premiere, hopefully at noon on Friday. I'm praying that by 4 o'clock on Friday we don't get a news drop, and I'm worried about that. So, yeah, let's hope not. You have any other closing thoughts, man?
Nope. It's draft season, baby. Caleb Williams, the Giant.
Caleb was a
But
Giant, and then if Caleb was a Giant, then everybody we discussed today is not a Giant because we won't have any draft picks left, and that's okay because Caleb's a Giant. Yeah, yeah.
But let's do some housekeeping first. Follow us at He's a Giant Pod. Follow me at Monte Cristo, MonteCri5TO. Follow Sal at Queens_guy on Twitter, X, whatever. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, rate us 5 stars if you're listening on Apple or Spotify. We appreciate all you guys for all your support
Oh
as
wait,
always. It's
I
been
have one more
awesome,
thing.
and we're excited to
Retweet,
continue to bring you
yeah,
this during the draft season.
retweet when Monty and I put out our pod links if you don't mind. Send it out. Send that shit to Bleacher Report. Thank you, Mason. Send that shit to Facebook. I don't care where you guys send it. Send it. We're looking to spread out and get more people involved in this. We definitely appreciate all of you guys who are loyal listeners, though. All right. Anything else? Or are we done here?
I think that's it.
All right, man. I will see you next week, guys. You have a good rest of your week and weekend. We will see you next week. Go Giants.
See you next week. Go Giants.